Personality and stress. You've been circling the parking lot for what seems like an hour trying to find a parking spot. You left home extra early so you wouldn't be late for class again. Aha, you finally see someone pulling out of a parking spot. You put your blinker on and wait patiently, silently praising the parking lot gods for your good luck. Just as the person backs out of the parking spot, from out of nowhere, another car screeches around the corner, coming from the opposite direction, and pulls into the spot that was clearly yours. Your jaw drops open. You can't believe what just happened. How do you react? Why do you react the way you do? Does your personality play a role in how you respond to the stressor? We all experience stress and stressful emotions such as anger in this situation with someone taking your parking spot, but why is it that some people react more adversely than others? What factors determine our reaction to stressors? Would you agree that our personality, to a large extent, predicts how we perceive and deal with stressors and those accompanying stressful emotions? So before we talk about personality and stress, I need to define what exactly I'm referring to when I use the term personality. Personality can be defined or described by its components. One theory is that our personality is made up of 4 components: values, which are abstract qualities that give meaning to our lives; attitudes, which are perceptions derived from values; beliefs, which are thoughts, ideas, and perceptions based on your attitudes and values; and behaviors, which are actions based on our values, attitudes, and beliefs. There are some personality types that tend to be more prone to stress, and some personality types that are more resistant to stress. Let's talk about stress-prone personalities first. Those with a stress-prone personality typically tend to stress out more often and to a greater extent than those with a stress-resistant personality. Perhaps the most stress-prone personality is Type A. This personality type was first identified in the 1960s. Take a look at some characteristics of Type A personality. Time urgency and impatience. People who often get frustrated when having to wait in line, who constantly interrupt others, or who always seem to be in a hurry are exhibiting this Type A characteristic. Polyphagia. This refers to multitasking or doing more than one thing at a time. Ultra-competitiveness. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be involved in a little healthy competition every so often, but being ultra-competitive about everything is indicative of a Type A personality. Manipulative control. This refers to someone who is domineering and controlling and somewhat of a bully. Hyperaggressiveness and hostility. Someone who is overly aggressive and hostile is usually rude and often raises his or her voice, gets easily upset over small things, or has a short fuse, and refuses to see the other person's point of view during conflict. Type A personality is not either or. You're either Type A or you're not. It can be seen on a continuum. My guess is that all of us probably have exhibited one or more Type A personality trait at some point in our lives, so don't stress out if you have one or more of these characteristics. It's not necessarily unhealthy to exhibit some Type A behaviors at times. The question is, to what extent are you Type A? Obviously, the more Type A traits you exhibit, and the more often that you exhibit them, the more likely you're Type A. A person on the extreme Type B side is someone who's extremely laid back, probably too laid back because they never get anything accomplished. Type C and D are somewhere in the middle, not super uptight, but not too laid back either. I do need to mention that one of these Type A characteristics has been strongly associated with heart disease and is considered the most detrimental to our health, and that is hyperaggressiveness and hostility. Having a hurried and impatient Type A personality doesn't necessarily put you at risk for coronary heart disease. If you're racing around because you're a go-getter, meaning that you're enthusiastic and positive, that doesn't hurt you. The hostile Type A's, on the other hand, react to anger with an excess of adrenaline, which puts them more at risk for heart disease. Another stress-prone personality is a codependent personality. Individuals with a strong codependent personality base their feelings of self-worth and self-identity on the approval of others. Characteristics of a codependent personality include believing one cannot survive without a particular relationship, being addicted to relationships, fearing abandonment, over-controlling, over-trusting, approval seekers, overachievers, perfectionists, and victims. Somewhat similar to a codependent personality, a person with a helpless, hopeless personality feels like he or she has no control over what happens to them. They feel that their life is completely controlled by external events. The cumulative impact of stress may lead a person to a state of learned helplessness. helpless. This concept was developed by Seligman in 1975 through a series of experiments with dogs. Seligman exposed the dogs to conditions under which they could not alleviate the stress encountered. As a result, the dogs became passive and accepting of stressful circumstances. Seligman paralleled the dog's state of learned helplessness to the human state of depression. When you feel like there's nothing you can do about something, you might exhibit helpless, hopeless characteristics. Have you ever seen a sports team or individual athlete give up in a sporting event in which they were losing by a long shot? The score is 100 million to 0 and their performance becomes way below what they're capable of. Maybe you felt like this when taking a class that you found to be extremely difficult. You just stopped trying because it seems like no matter how hard you study, you don't do well on the assignments and exams. So you stop studying. Why try when it doesn't help? Someone with a helpless, hopeless personality usually gives up fairly easy and quickly when things get tough. Depression is strongly associated with the helpless, hopeless personality. The concept associated with a helpless, hopeless personality type is an external locus of control, or LOC. Someone with a strong external LOC feels that external events rule their life. They don't feel that they have control over what happens to them. Nothing is their fault. They feel that their external environment determines the circumstances of their life. Examples include an athlete who skips practices and then blames the loss of the game on poor officiating, a student who doesn't study and then blames the professor for his or her poor grade, a person who doesn't have the self-discipline to live within his or her means and then blames the high cost of living for his or her debt. People who expect to have exceptions made for them also are exhibiting an external LOC. The person who gets upset because the restaurant will not honor an expired coupon, the student who expects that the professor will allow him or her to submit an assignment late, the person who expects the police officer not to give a ticket because he or she was going only so many miles over the speed limit, are displaying an external LOC. On the other hand, someone with a strong internal LOC feels that they are completely in charge of what happens to them. Even if there was poor officiating and unfair calls made, athletes with a strong internal LOC will focus on what they could have done better, not on the poor officiating. Even if the exam was written poorly by the professor, a student with a strong internal LOC will focus on the fact that he or she could have studied harder and will brainstorm how they can study better next time. A man who was serving time in prison was going to be released early for good behavior, but he wanted to finish out his sentence because, unlike 99% of other prisoners, he admitted his guilt. He said that he deserved to finish his time because he had committed the crime. Perhaps that is the best example of a strong internal LOC. LOC is a very important concept in terms of managing stress. The more in control of their lives that people feel, the less likely they are to feel stressed. People with a strong internal LOC may still get stressed, but it's most likely less often and to a lesser degree than someone with a strong external LOC. Think of someone who handles stress really well. What type of personality characteristics does he or she have? After looking at 1,200 men and women who deal well with stressful situations, Dr. Flannery, a professor at Harvard University Medical School, found that people who handle stress well had some characteristics in common. They tended to control their lives and look for active solutions to problems. They were committed to meaningful goals. They used little nicotine and caffeine. Thought that was interesting. They relaxed at least 15 minutes each day. They got regular aerobic exercise, and they were actively involved with others. Dr. Flannery noted that we tend to underestimate the importance of this last one, social interaction. Studies indicate that social contact may lower pulse rate and blood pressure, enhance the immune system, and boost the production of endorphins, which are neurochemicals that make us feel good. When we're in a caring relationship with another person, all these health benefits can accrue. Learning to be resilient means learning to actually make stress work for you. The key is to learn from it and use it as a motivation for change. Resilience, which can be developed and strengthened over time, refers to the ability to adapt when things go wrong. Here are just a few of the traits associated with resilience that can help us adapt to stressors and bounce back more easily from life's hardships. Decisiveness, or acting with influence instead of helplessness in the face of adversity. Sense of purpose, or a commitment to life and having the ability to interpret personal experiences at life's most challenging moments. Values, or important principles and beliefs. Flexibility, or the ability to adapt and respond in different ways and find new solutions to challenges at hand. Self-care, or attending to individual needs physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Humor, or maintaining a strong sense of humor when faced with challenging circumstances. Research indicates a good sense of humor doesn't just put a smile on your face, it gets the feel-good hormones circulating in your brain and helps keep the immune system strong so you're able to handle stress and manage chronic conditions. Responsibility, or taking responsibility for your own actions and their outcomes for better or worse. Support, or cultivating relationships and drawing on them for support when needed. Optimism, or having a positive outlook, focusing on the cans and not the cannots. Someone with a hearty personality is one who has what's called the 3 C's: challenge, control, and commitment. Challenge, they see problems as stepping stones or challenges rather than problems. Control, they feel in control of their lives. Commitment, they have a strong level of commitment to accomplishing their goals. The million-dollar question is, if you have a stress-prone personality, does that mean you're doomed to being stressed out all your life? Is it possible to change your personality? Referring back to the components of personality, is it possible to change any of these components? Actually, it's possible to change all 4 of these components, but there's one component that's the most easily influenced. This does not imply that it's easy to change, but it's the least difficult component to change compared to the other 3, and that is behaviors. We definitely can change our behaviors. It's a bit more difficult to change deeply rooted values, attitudes, and beliefs. Of the 4 components, the one that's the most difficult to change is your values, which many are instilled at a very young age. So if we can change our behavior, which is a component of personality, then technically, yes, we can change our personality to an extent. Learning to alter your behaviors in order to effectively manage stress is the primary purpose of any stress management program. So in one sense, learning to change your personality, or one component of your personality, is absolutely critical in order to effectively manage stress. The supplemental video for this lecture is entitled Eli Bay Discusses Type A Personality. It's just over 3 minutes and was given at a conference in Toronto, Canada in 2007. Listen to what he says about how dangerous it is to have a Type A personality. Key points. Several common characteristics have been found to be associated with those who handle stress well. Type A, Codependent, and Helpless Hopeless are stress-prone personality types. Resilient and Hardy are stress-resistant personalities. Locus of control is an important concept in terms of how we deal with stress. And that's it for this lecture.